end, I ask for as much feedback as possible, and it inevitably improves the writing. So I couldn't say that enough, but I'll move on to the next slide, but it is really, really important. I also wanted to make the point that you really want to try to anticipate questions that people might have as they read your proposal, which is a great reason to ask people to read it ahead of time. And then to remember that the proposal goes alone. You do not go with it. You don't get to stand in the meeting when they're reading your proposal and reviewing it and answer any questions that may come up. The proposal has to speak for your project, for your need, for your institution, for your proposed solution. So please remember that it's great to ask people, what is it that you would ask? What's unclear here? Because at some point that document is going to leave your hands and it will go to the funder alone, and you won't be with it to clarify anything. So try to anticipate questions that people may have and to answer them as you write. I also wanted to mention that when you're writing your proposal, you want to include outcomes-based evaluations. And what I mean by that is, what does success look like in the end? I put a picture here of a 10-mile race that I just ran actually a couple of days ago before doing this presentation. And I'm not a runner. I hate running. It's my least favorite thing to do. But I just decided, okay, I'm going to run a 10-mile race here in Orlando where I live. And I could definitely do a lot of activities leading up to that race. My goal is to finish the race and to improve my fitness. And I could do all kinds of activities leading up to that race and measure those activities. I could sit and think a lot about the race, contemplate it a lot. I could count the number of minutes that I've contemplated the race, and that may seem like a useful activity, but it won't result in the outcome that I want, which is to actually cross the finish line and improve my fitness. And so I think you want to think about, when you're writing your proposal, what does success actually look like? Not just all the activities we're going to do along the way, but what are we trying to achieve, and how will we know that we've achieved it in the end? The race is quite easy. You cross the finish line and you're still standing. But for your project, that might be a lot more complicated. And I like to include a research specialist in the team when I'm writing a proposal, so that person can kind of help me understand, you need to have a measure that we can look at in the end. What does that look like? How will we know that you succeeded? And help me to create that as I'm writing the proposal, a clear way to know that we've achieved our goals. So I just wanted to mention a little bit about budgets as well. And people never believe me when I say this, but budgets are stories. They're just stories told in the form of numbers. And that takes a bit of translation. I lived in Italy for a year, and I taught English there, but I also tried to learn Italian, and I had some success learning Italian by the time I left. But I'll never forget, in the very beginning of my time there, I was in line at a salad bar, and the word for tomato and afternoon, it's very similar in Italian, and so I ended up asking if I could have only afternoons in my salad, which was very embarrassing. So I realized that sometimes things can get lost in translation, and I think one of the biggest balls that's dropped in proposal writing is that when people try to translate their project, their ideas, their words into numbers, things get lost in translation. And so one thing I would say is, when you're creating a budget, make sure it's complete. Make sure things don't get lost in translation. And what I mean by that is, often people will say, well, I need personnel, for instance, in order to do this particular project. And so the cost of having a person is their salary. So I'm going to put the salary in the budget. But they fail to remember that there are also things like benefits. You have to have a space to put that person. That person might need equipment to use while they're doing their job. So make sure that when you're translating your project into your budget, that you don't leave things behind. Another thing that is often part of a budget is something called overhead, which is a dollar amount that accounts for all the things that can't be tied specifically to your project. So maybe you need lights in the building where you're doing your project, but those lights also light areas of the building that are being used by other people. Or you have administrators who are going to have time associated with managing your project, but that time can't be tied really specifically to your specific project. But you want to try to account for those things. And often funders will allow for a certain percentage of your total budget to be devoted to those things that you can't tie specifically to your project, but that the resources that will be used up as you're accomplishing your goals. Not every funder will, but some will allow for the inclusion of overhead. So just make sure that your budget is complete when you translate it, that you've thought of every aspect of the costs associated with your project. I like to meet with the CFO here at our organization and ask him to go over the budget with me, just as another pair of eyes, so that he can make sure that I've thought of all these things. The other thing is to think of items that are not on the budget when you're creating your grant proposal. I put a lovely picture of New England in the fall here. I was born in New England. I was born in Maine, grew up there, and I just love to hike. That's something that I love to do. I love to go out in nature and hike. But I have to remember that every day that I go out and hike, there are 10 other things I'm not doing because I'm hiking. Now, I happen to think hiking was the best use of my time, but I have to remember that there are things I can't do because I'm doing this particular thing. And the same with your proposal. When you commit the resources of your organization to a project, you are taking them away from other things. So often when people create budgets, they think of the cost of the actual project that they're doing. But you have to make sure that everyone in your organization is on board with committing people and resources to the project that you're proposing, because they won't be able to do 10 other things because they're doing that one. So just remember that there are costs that are not associated with the line items in your budget, and you have to take those into account when you're proposing a project to a funder. I just put this up 2 + 2 = 5, which really pains my heart as someone who has an accounting background, just to remind you that numbers need editors too. People often think of asking someone to read the writing that they do for grammar or for clarity, and budgets need the exact same kind of attention, not just to make sure that arithmetic is working and is correct, but also to make sure that it makes sense, that you're telling your story in your budget as well, in a way that's clear to the reader. So just get feedback on your budget too. Don't just hand over the written part, hand over the budget part as well and ask someone to give you feedback on that. And then when you're thinking about costs, you have to think about, will the story continue? Will you be able to sustain this project or this idea or these goals past the funder's initial partnership with you? Mostly because people like to invest in things that can last longer than their funding. So in some cases, a funder may know that it's a one-time deal, a pilot, a startup, and they'll be willing to engage with that. But in most cases, they'll want to know, how are you going to continue to do this when we are no longer funding you? So you want to think about, how is this story going to continue past the end of this grant? How will we be able to support this project? And to consider that as part of your proposal. I just wanted to put up here my contact information. You can please feel free to contact me because, as I said in the beginning, writing is a group effort, and the more people that we can include in our community as writers, as proposal writers, as people seeking funding for really worthy projects, the better the outcome will be. So I hope that you will reach out, let me know what you're working on, and I would love to maybe bring you into my own proposal writing community, ask for your eyes on some writing that I'm doing, and vice versa. So I wish you the best of luck in your efforts, and I hope to hear from you. Thank you very much.